Level 1, the cleaner. It is exactly 2 a.m. The hotel corridor is plunged into silence, broken only by the rattling of a cart over the thick carpet and the muffled, crackling melody from an old radio. You sigh, beads of sweat forming on your forehead. Your mind is filled with the image of your young daughter lying at home with a high fever. Everything would have ended normally if you hadn't pushed open the door to room 402 as scheduled. The door swings open, and a pungent metallic scent hits you instantly. On the plush rug, a man in a high-end suit lies motionless. Beside him, a pool of red is slowly soaking into the expensive fabric. A stranger stands there, a silenced pistol still emitting a faint wisp of smoke. He turns, his cold eyes boring into you, completely unfazed. You freeze, your breath catching in your throat. But before your fear can turn into a scream, he tosses a thick stack of bills onto the table. "Clean it, make it as if it never existed," he orders in a gravelly voice. You stare at the $5,000, more than your annual salary, then at the corpse, then back at the red pool slowly darkening under the dim yellow lights. Your conscience screams at you to run, but the reality of medical bills and your daughter's medicine crushes all morality. You lower your head, your trembling hand reaching out to grip the handle of the mop. The pacing suddenly accelerates to a breathless speed. The sound of scrubbing tile, the splashing of water, the screech of a vacuum cleaner like a demon's wail. You work like a machine, every movement practiced and precise in your panic. Just 20 minutes later, room 402 is spotless, stripped of any trace of life or death. As you step out of the hotel, the biting night air does not stop your shivering. You return home and silently stash the cash in a cereal box on the kitchen shelf, masking your first corruption beneath a veneer of poverty, never knowing that your life has officially veered onto a path of no return. Level 2. The Mule. A week has passed, but the sensation of that red pool still haunts your every dream. You stand huddled at a bus stop, the freezing rain lashing your face, feeling as though the world outside is becoming increasingly alien. A sleek black SUV pulls up to the curb, tearing through the rain. The electric window rolls down slowly, revealing the emotionless face of the man from that night. Without a word, he tosses a car key into your lap. The sound of metal hitting fabric rings out sharply against the rain. You climb into the car, the scent of expensive leather mixed with a foul, fishy odor hitting your senses. As you settle into the driver's seat, a faint, ragged moan comes from the back. The trunk is vibrating with weak, rhythmic breathing. You look in the rearview mirror in horror. The eyes of the man who drove that night are now fixed on you, cold and oppressive, as if he is weighing whether you are an accomplice or a threat to be eliminated. Your hands shake violently on the steering wheel. "To the harbor, never look back," he whispers, his large hand shoving a thick envelope containing $10,000 toward you. This is not an offer, it is a sentence. You look at the envelope, at the amount that could pay off your family's debts, and your last shred of self-respect shatters like the raindrops on the windshield. You grab the keys and start the engine. When the tempo explodes, the engine roars wildly on the highway. The wipers working at full capacity still cannot make the route ahead clear. You recklessly slam on the gas, blowing through bright red traffic lights, your heart pounding as if it wants to burst from your chest. Upon reaching the harbor, you toss the keys onto the wet ground, not daring to look back at the trunk, and throw yourself into the deep, dark night. You have officially crossed the threshold, becoming a courier for evil, leaving behind an honest life that you now know you can never reclaim. Level 3. The Dispatcher. After that fateful night at the harbor, the man who drove that night saw in you a ruthless coldness when faced with life or death stakes. Suddenly he pulled you from the dangerous transport detail and placed you in a basement room, where you officially became the Dispatcher. Now, you are surrounded by sick burner phones. The incessant ringing creates a chaotic, haunting symphony. Suddenly, the phone in the corner of the desk vibrates violently. The voice on the other end is panicked. "The shipment at point A is compromised. Police are raiding." You look at the map where red lines are closing in. Cold sweat breaks out, but your mind remains icy and sharp. You stand before a life or death choice. Sacrifice $1 million shipment or sacrifice the courier currently in the hands of the enemy. Without a moment's hesitation, you flick the switch to decline the call, cutting off all communication with the desperate caller. Your fingers dance across the keyboard, reconnecting to the specialized cleanup crew. Your voice is low, emotionless. "Wipe out point A, leave no witnesses." You hang up, and calmly light a cigarette. The tempo in the room becomes suffocating. The frantic clacking of keys, the overlapping phone rings sounding like distant screams. On the screen, the green signals disappear one by one, replaced by a deadly silence. You stare into the void, realizing you are no longer the lowly cleaner or courier you once were. You are now the player moving the pieces, the one who decides who lives and who vanishes entirely into oblivion. Level 4. The Enforcer. 3 months later, having proven yourself to be a pawn that never hesitates, the driver from years ago personally brings you out of the basement and into the light of liquidations. You are now the Enforcer, your hands, which once only glided over control keys, now encased in cold black leather gloves. You walk into a small bakery in the suburbs, where the oven is still clacking away. The owner, a middle-aged man, collapses the moment he sees you, his eyes bulging in terror. He stammers, begging for one more week to scrape together the trust tax interest imposed by the family. You slowly check the watch on your wrist. Time is the only commodity you never allow anyone to bargain for. Without a word, you pull a cold metal baton from your back pocket. The sound of metal hitting metal rings out dry and sharp in the cramped space. The tempo suddenly shifts to a brutal state. You swing the baton. A decisive blow aims straight at the kneecap of the man begging. The dry crunch of bone echoes, drowning out the shop's doorbell that just chimed. What follows is a cacophony. The victim screams, the impact of metal on flesh, and the sound of shattering glass as the shop owner collapses into the display case. Everything happens in a flash, instinctive and cold-blooded. As droplets of red splatter onto your polished leather shoes, you no longer stoop to wipe them away like the cleaner of the old days. You stand tall, adjust your collar, look at the man writhing in a pool of blood, and calmly turn your back to walk out of the shop. A terrifying silence envelops the street after you leave. You are no longer the one who cleans the scene. You are the scene itself. Level 5. The Captain 6 months pass. From an enforcer directly dipping your hands in blood, you have risen to captain, a position of power where a snap of your fingers is enough to decide a person's fate. Tonight, at the luxury nightclub managed by the family, you are seated in a leather armchair at a VIP table, surrounded by 4 massive bodyguards. Your eyes scan a space heavy with the scent of perfume and submission. Suddenly, your right-hand man approaches, whispering about a betrayal at the Eastern Branch. You show no emotion, simply rising quietly to walk toward the one-way glass wall. On the other side, the traitor is hanging upside down, his face swollen from brutal interrogation. He cannot see you, but you clearly see the panic in his eyes through the dark glass. Betrayal is the only sin this empire never pardons. It is a lesson you must execute to maintain order. Thus, you say nothing, merely giving a slight nod as if accepting a routine request for service. Immediately, a sharp, clean gunshot rings out from the torture room, cutting off the man's moans. You return to the table, casually taking a sip of expensive wine, savoring the bitter taste melting on your tongue while the thumping music continues to explode. The tempo now carries the style of absolute authority. The red and green laser lights sweep across the faces of your subordinates, illuminating the awe in their eyes. You run your own empire with sharp nods and decisive snaps of your fingers. You are no longer the one performing the crime. You are the architect of fear, standing at the pinnacle of a food chain where loyalty is measured by eternal silence. Level 6. The Consigliere. A year later, from someone once splattered with blood in bars, and you now wear the sharp suit of a consigliere, the private law firm has become your true headquarters, where merger files and crucial financial loopholes are laid out on the desk. The boss sits opposite you, eyes fixed on you, asking about the war for market share that is shaking the entire city. You know full well that if you nod for an all-out assault, tens of thousands of liters of red liquid will once again flood the alleys, pushing the entire empire into the crosshairs of the media and the government. You quietly set your pen down, your calm eyes reflecting the expertise tempered through past storms. Instead of guns and bullets, you propose a clean elimination solution by adjusting administrative regulations and changing key personnel on the city council. A revised law is sharper than 1,000 bullets, you say softly. The office space becomes solemn but suffocatingly tense, enough to hear the steady hum of the air conditioner, the scratch of a signature pen, the crisp sound of turning file pages. They ring out like the countdown of a sentence being passed. No explosions, no corpses. Everything is determined in the silence of an air-conditioned room, where the city's future is captured with just a signature and a few lines of amended law. Level 7, The Dawn. 5 years later, from a cleaner wiping up crime scenes, you now stand at the top of the food chain, settled in a fortified villa on the hilltop. From the floor-to-ceiling glass window, you look down at the city slowly lighting up, a labyrinth of sin that you have painstakingly established and taken over with absolute power. The soft sound of a door opening behind you interrupts your train of thought. Neg, your son, enters, his frame tall, his face exuding the coldness you have spent a lifetime forging for yourself. In his hand is a silenced pistol, a rusted weapon, the very gun you picked up on that first night in room 402. "I'm ready," he says, his gaze fixed steadily on your desk. You freeze, looking at your son, then down at the city lights below. The cruel truth hits you. You cannot stop this empire, but you never wanted your son to follow in your footsteps. However, the choice is no longer yours. The survival of the family demands a successor. The tempo now becomes slow, heavy to the point of suffocation. The ticking of the wall clock is steady, sounding like the countdown of an eternal, inescapable loop. As you slowly turn back and see yourself in your son's eyes, a chill runs down your spine. You realize that although you have dominated this city, you have only completed your greatest task, turning your own family into animals trapped in the iron cage you worked so hard to build.